Outer Wilds is a game about the end of the world. If that sentence is enough to intrigue you, then you can stop watching. Outer Wilds is best experienced without any spoilers, to the point where some could argue that this very sentence is one that gives away far too much. There's no other game that has stuck with me as much as Outer Wilds and its expansion, Echoes of the Eye. Any discussion of the game is a spoiler because your progression is directly linked to your knowledge of the world, so please, I beg of you, experience it for yourself, and thank me later. Since I know many of you will hang around anyways, I'll try to avoid as many spoilers as possible in terms of specifics, but there will still be spoilers ahead. You have been warned. I've never been more profoundly impacted or scared by a game like I have with Outer Wilds, and I'd like to talk about what Outer Wilds says about the end of the world, the past, the future, fear, and existence. Yet these ideas are merely teased at the beginning as we wake to the night sky, with as many stars as there are possibilities, and our attention among all of these monolithic points of interest is grabbed by a shooting star. I can't imagine a single person who upon witnessing these sights doesn't want to immediately explore, but we're barred off, first needing to traverse our home world of Timber Hearth, which despite being inhabited by Hearthians, akin to pop culture depictions of aliens, is familiar, feeling like a slice of our own floating space rock. The opening tutorial is not just one of the most tranquil areas in gaming, but it's crucial to building a sense of comfort within the player. Fear is relative to comfort and knowledge. We are comfortable in what we know, and I felt very comfortable in Timber Hearth. The homes looked like ones from Earth, the music was relaxed, and the dialogue, despite the extraterrestrial characters they come from, felt entirely human. This is important to establish because it sets up a very reasonable fear of space. The great unknown is not terrifying because it's an infinite void of nothing, but of something, and you don't know what. Every rule is broken and there's no safety net, no gravity to keep you grounded. The fear of space is closely linked to a fear of the ocean because they share the same qualities, endless space where you are entirely vulnerable, and with what lies below being unknown. There's also fear in the sheer vastness of space. When you have basic space knowledge, knowing that our sun is a star, and seeing other stars, other solar systems in the distance, gives us perspective on our own size. Things that are small are insignificant. When we see an ant on the sidewalk, we see a tiny, thoughtless creature, and often we don't care whether it lives or dies. In space, we're the ants. These planets, they're colossal creatures, these unknown entities. Don't think twice about our lives or deaths. This isn't to say these planets or the sun are intelligent, they likely aren't, and that makes it worse. The idea of being an intelligent life form among a world that simply is terrifies me. This idea comes together most prominently near the game's conclusion, but before we get there, I want to talk about the other side of fear, which is the desire for refuge. This is why establishing Timber Hearth as a safe space is so important. We need a place to call home before we can call anything else unfamiliar, and every time you wake up, you take that same plunge into the unknown, thrusted by the inevitability of your death. You might even take solace in the fact that your death will lead to another gasp for air at the beginning of the loop. But that solace is halted by how powerless you are. No matter what you do, the solar system continues to do what it pleases, and you're but a victim to the universe. When someone is powerless, they look to someone or something to empower them, and this is where many players look to the Eye. When I think about how powerless I am, I always try to find purpose in something greater. Maybe it's the universe, and certain superstitious laws like karma that can be relied on. Maybe it's a god, but anything to not accept that I am utterly alone and that I am at the whims of a random series of events. Your failure's a sick joke, your success mere chance. But if there's something greater, then you can rationalize that it's all part of a plan. Something out there has a plan for you. This suffering isn't for nothing. The Eye began to take on a similar role. All of the challenges in the game were for the Eye, to find the Eye, and I'd hoped that when I did, my questions would be answered, and that I might be saved. It is true that the Eye is merely the name given to the signal the Nomai encountered, but as the many shrines that signal would show, it became so much more. This signal evolved into a deity, a living entity. The Nomai were convinced it called out to them, and for a reason. All of their efforts, and now all this time later, our efforts are in the name of this Eye. This time loop, the sun, all this fear, it must be for something greater. It must be for something. The Nomai don't want to be powerless. We don't want to be powerless, and if we truly are, we don't want to be alone. And you don't need to be. There are plenty of companions across the game that showcase different perspectives. Death comes up on more than a few occasions. Most don't know about their impending doom, but those that do are terrified, almost wishing that they hadn't known. It made me wonder if I would want to know. Is it better to know when it's all going to cease, or to continue unaware of how short your time is? Does it matter at all? If we really are so insignificant, why does death concern us at all? If all our happiness and sadness is determined by chance, it lacks any meaning, and thus our lives are just another insignificant event within a universe with trillions of them. Good times will be missed, but with the end of the good times is also the end of the bad times. No more pain, but no more healing. It's a lot for some of these characters to process in just 22 minutes. Some, like Esker, are already dead, having been forgotten by the world, observing it through a camera lens and signal scope. On the opposite end, Feldspar is enjoying the time alone, having been presumed dead by their friends. Others have a more positive outlook. Gabbro sees his pseudo-immortality as a good thing, and this can become the player too. When designing a game in space, you can never truly achieve an endless space because our technology prevents it. Outer Wilds does just about everything it can to present the atmosphere of space, but even then, if you play the game enough, you'll run out of things to explore, things to learn, and things to fear. Eventually, the boundaries of this sandbox will be clear as day. You can't go to other solar systems, you can't kill any of your friends, but that isn't a flaw in the game. In fact, given the 22-minute loop, it makes sense that you wouldn't have time to visit elsewhere, but it presents a problem, only solved by the very nature of Outer Wilds' gameplay loop. Discovery drives every character, every story, and the player. Logic would follow that every question has an answer, and thus the possibility of doing something is what begs for it to be done. Outer Wilds is structured in a way that every line of questioning presents not just an answer, but another question. For example, let's say you explore the Addle Rock, Timber Hearth's moon first. You'll find ruins that contain an eye signal locator. Through exploring, you'll be introduced to the concept of the eye, understand that the Nomai are trying to find it, and you'll know that they built a stronger observatory. Your questions of what are these ruins and what are they trying to do here are answered, but you now know that they tried again somewhere else, and the goal is to find it and discover more about the eye. Later discoveries are often twofold. There are different plots running at the same time. The eye, the Nomai, your friends, and major discoveries will push you down the line of answering one question, while also gathering clues for the larger mysteries that hang overhead, being the Ash Twin Project, what happened to the Nomai, and getting to the eye. There is no skill tree, no hidden items, no secret techniques. This is why spoilers are to be avoided, because for each bit of information you know, you lose out on the experience of Outer Wilds, which is assuming something about a topic or place, exploring that topic, and finding the true answer, often through your own logic. You won't have text pop up on the screen exclaiming that you solved a puzzle, and that makes Outer Wilds a great puzzle game, one that makes the player feel smart for figuring something out, and without spelling it out for them. It also means that discoveries are satisfying when you brute force your way into them. Sure, you could go through a series of audio logs and discoveries to figure out how to get past the strong current on Giant's Deep, or you could go so fast that the speed of your ship alone breaks the barrier. Despite having discovered just about everything I could, I still return to the game frequently, just to bask in the beauty of the solar system, which can't be understated. I have yet to see a game fill me with so much dread knowing that the sun was going to go supernova, and yet, I've also never felt so satisfied seeing everything in the game be coated in a burning, blinding blue divinity. The universe's finale. Outer Wilds achieves something few games do, which is a consistent explanation for nearly everything. There are so many minute details that have an in-universe explanation, and this excellence was initially missed on my first playthrough, and I felt awful about it afterwards. I play a lot of games, and unfortunately in our current day, games are buggy, they don't always work as intended, and even with Outer Wilds' high quality standard, it too can be victim to those issues. But my skepticism towards its minute details caused me to miss parts of the story at first. When discovering a document that plants the seeds for explaining the time loop, I assumed it was an error or a glitch. This is important because you may see things that are strange and you might be quick to think it's a glitch or that it's unintended, but take this piece of advice. Do not let the bad games you play prevent you from seeing a good one. I did eventually figure out what this text was trying to tell me because the game does have a ship log that tracks your discoveries over the loops, but there were many moments in the game where my wonder was inhibited by a feeling that something wasn't intended. It's not the game's fault, but it's something I felt worth mentioning because I've seen many others experience this. Anyways, back to your finality, which eventually will be real. Before you make your final voyage, there's an insane amount of tension. This time, all those dangers pose a real threat, and if you mess up, it's over. Music is something I haven't mentioned up to this point because I have no expertise in it, but this track that plays is beautiful, as is the rest of the soundtrack. There's leitmotifs sewn throughout it, and when we gather our friends, building the theme of the game, it brought a tear to my eye. But there's also a point to this setup, which is to say that Outer Wilds presents the end of the universe, the end of all life, including our own, as something hopeful. There's always going to be some sadness in the idea that things must end, and that we, like the rest of the universe, are all victims of our own existence. All of our experiences, the results of chance, all our despair, the whims of a mindless universe. No matter what tragedy strikes our reality, life goes on. And that's what I interpreted the somber but hopeful ending of Outer Wilds to be. One where everything does end, but with it, there's a new beginning. And despite not being able to see that beginning, knowing that it will happen is enough. I still struggle to fully agree with this sentiment. Hell, it's hard wrapping your head around reality not existing at all, or the idea that when we die, it really does cease existing, unless we have an eye of the universe-like deity to hold out hope for. I've talked a lot about fear in Outer Wilds. It plays a large theme in the game's atmosphere, but it is otherwise not mentioned in the story, and that's a strange oversight. As established, space is scary. The possibility of beasties and unknown concepts made me wary of exploring certain planets. We spend our whole journey finding answers, but we never ask, what happens if we don't like the answers presented to us? This first occurred to me when I found out the cause of the Nomai's death. A chance. The Nomai were fearless, and if they did feel fear, it was astronomically outweighed by their curiosity. They were smart, they engineered technology that dwarfs that of the Hearthians, and yet, they still lost. They came to the solar system and were screwed over, and within that same system they died. They took a chance, and the chance took them. This is an unfortunate fact of the universe. It doesn't matter how hard you try, how smart you are, how much you prepare. Sometimes you just get unlucky. Maybe it's too much of a stretch to consider what happened to the Nomai realistic, but is it? In a universe with millions of comets, thousands of galaxies, is it really that unlikely that what happened to them is a one-time event? I find it hard to say. This theme of fear is fully explored in Echoes of the Eye, which is potentially the greatest DLC I've ever played. My only concern with Echoes of the Eye is that part of its brilliance is how well it's integrated. This feels like it could have been there from the beginning, and that's lost on new players, unfortunately. I hope that alone is a testament to the game's quality, as in this case it quite literally is too good, but further, Echoes of the Eye utilizes fear to enhance its narrative. The strangers, otherwise referred to as the Alks, seem like these monstrous beasts long dead, but when we find that they are in some form alive, they become terrifying. Their howls like a siren, their lanterns an oppressive light that must be avoided, but as you complete the DLC you realize that they are just as afraid as you are. The reason everything is dark is because that's a reflection of their mindset. They knew what the Eye would do to them and everyone else, and their reaction created a desire to obscure and hide the Eye, stop anyone else from getting to it, and leave everyone else in the dark. Once we understand their fear, we go from fearing the Alks to feeling sorry for them. They left everything behind in pursuit of the Eye and were burned. Where the Nomai sought to rebuild, the Alks just wanted to go home. They spent their days crying over photos of their life before building the Stranger, and their response to their fear of the future was to take refuge in the past. Once they had died, they became trapped in the dream, stuck in the past. And the only person to look towards the future and trust the Eye was locked away. They discouraged the curiosity that took their home, and it's why the player needs to overcome that fear to free the prisoner. But even the victory is bittersweet. The prisoner doesn't get a happy ending. His body is long decomposed, and after years gazing up at his home planet in a cage, someone finally frees him and says that his species is dead. The best he gets is an opportunity to end his story. The reel that depicts him and the player traveling into the horizon is the prisoner trying to step into the future. They spent so long in the past that all they want to do is step into what's next, even if that step leads to the end. The prisoner is communicating that it's time to move on and leave this place in the past where it belongs. This further heightens the theme of the base game. The Alks, in all their attempts to prevent the end of the universe, failed. Their fear of the future did not prevent it from happening, all it did was prevent them from witnessing it. The beauty of the ending is that while it is the end, we were there, and that's the greatest gift the Eye could give. We, like the Alks, spend most of the game in the past. Sometimes it's the Alks' past, and others it's within ancient texts from the Nomai. We explore ruins, old architecture, and destroyed towns. It's only once we understand this past, though, that we can move forward into an unknown future. We may fail. We might never see the fruits of our labor, the answers to our questions. But as with everything else in the universe, we are simple beings that fulfill desires. Our heads churning until one day they split, our hearts aching until they stop. the fate of which is decided by mere chance. This is something I feel Outer Wilds communicates, but it also communicates that within such a depressing state of being, beauty can still come out of it. Our struggles aren't without joy, and that's what motivates us. Everyone goes through great challenges, and yet we push through. We don't want it to end, even if the thought of the suffering ceasing makes non-existence an easier pill to swallow. We want to know what's next. That's why the prisoner and eventually we intentionally die. There's nothing left for us but to see what's next. Chance and coincidence undeniably play a role in our existence, and it's saddening to think that all this pain is for nothing, but the opposite is also true. There's so much beauty that, also by chance, appeared, and is beautiful for nothing. And that's kinda awesome. The fact that all of this was communicated through a cute space game costing a third of the price of heartless AAA titles is why those who have played it are constantly recommending it, and it's why I endlessly watch others play the game. Because seeing someone else react to the discoveries of the game is the closest I'll ever get to experiencing it for the first time again. I know I've said a lot about the game, and I know I've given away a handful of story spoilers, but if you didn't heed my warning about the spoilers at the beginning, then I highly recommend you still play the game, as the atmosphere is best experienced, not described. Anyone who played the game will tell you that playing the game vicariously through someone else is not a replacement for playing it yourself. On the surface, at a glance, Outer Wilds is a game about the end of the world, but it's really about so much more. It's worth your time, and I thank you for giving me yours. I also want to thank our patrons and YouTube members for supporting the channel. I hope you stay safe, and take care.